Salut! Today we're going to see quite a few points. However, they should all be straightforward. So hang on to your seat and make sure you pay attention. Today we will cover the use of the infinitive with reflexive verbs. We will see the verb commencer and also how to apologize. And finally, how to say someone or something is late, early or on time. As always, please download the notes using the link in the description below and go over them after watching this video to make sure you understand every point. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more of our videos and to like this video if you enjoy it. Alright, let's get started with the reflexive verbs and the infinitive. You probably remember, at least I hope, that we use the infinitive of a verb in some tenses like the near future or the immediate past, or with some verbs like the verb aimer or devoir, for example. The near future is when we say something is going to happen. And we use the verb aller in French in the present and then an infinitive. This is why I'm going to eat is je vais manger. Manger in this sentence is the infinitive. We also use the infinitive after the verb aimer, as I just said. For example, I love to eat is j'aime manger. Well, the point I need to make today is quite easy. When you have a reflexive verb, you still need to use the appropriate reflexive pronoun even if you're using the infinitive. Basically, don't put se unless you're using il, elle, on, il, or elle plural. And this is because the reflexive pronoun has to agree in gender and number with the subject. After all, we all remember that when we use a reflexive verb, it means that someone is doing something to themselves. The subject and the object of that sentence is the same person. Take, for example, the verb se laver, which means to wash oneself. If I say I'm washing myself, in French we say je me lave, using the reflexive pronoun me. But we say tu te laves, using the reflexive pronoun te. Well, if we were to make this sentence using the near future and say I'm going to wash myself, we would apply the regular rule, which is to add the infinitive of the verb after conjugating the verb aller. But we need to remember to also have the reflexive pronoun agree with our subject. This is why our sentence will be je vais me laver and not je vais se laver. If we wanted to say you're going to wash yourself, we would therefore say tu vas te laver. I think you get the point here. But if you have trouble remembering the reflexive pronouns, I invite you to go back to lesson 13. I think you can click somewhere here above my head. Now, as I said, this is the same with verbs like aimer or devoir, where we can just put an infinitive after. If I want to say I love to dance, I conjugate I love, j'aime, and then I add the infinitive of to dance, danser. And our sentence is j'aime danser. So what if I want to say I love to wash myself? Well, the same rule as before applies. It's still I who loves to wash and the object I love to wash is myself, me. So our sentence would be j'aime me laver. Honestly, I think this is pretty straightforward and with some examples you should be able to clearly see what's happening here. Here are 3 examples with their translation. Nous allons nous coiffer means we are going to do our hair. Tu viens de te lever means you just got up. Vous devez vous réveiller means you must wake up. Okay, now we need to go over the verb commencer. The verb commencer is a regular verb of the first group, except with nous, you will need to add a cédilla on the C to keep the sound S. The verb commencer is conjugated in the present as follows. Repeat after me. Je commence, tu commences, il commence, nous commençons, vous commencez, il commence. Now, the verb commencer uses the auxiliary avoir, and the past participle of the verb is commencer with an accented E. Therefore, the verb commencer in the passé composé is conjugated as follows. Repeat after me. J'ai commencé. Tu as commencé. Il a commencé. Nous avons commencé. Vous avez commencé. Ils ont commencé. Finally, using the nous conjugation in the present, nous commençons, and removing the ending ons, we can form the imparfait by adding our regular endings. Therefore, the imperfect conjugation of the verb commencer is as follows. Repeat after me. Je commençais. Tu commençais. Il commençait. Nous commencions. Vous commenciez. Il commençait. Now, you can use the verb commencer in 3 different ways. First, without any preposition, it just means to start something, followed by a direct object. For example, I'm starting a book, would be je commence un livre. But if you add the preposition a with the accent, after the verb commencer, you can either use an infinitive to mean to start to do something, or any time of the day to say when something starts. For example, I'm starting to eat would be je commence à manger. And the show starts at 10 a.m. would be le spectacle commence à 10 heures. Okay, our next point is the verb s'excuser. There are several ways to apologize in French. For example, you can just say pardon when bumping into someone on the street or at the supermarket. But the reflexive verb s'excuser is what we commonly use when we'd like to say I'm sorry as a full sentence. Now, let's go over the conjugation of the verb s'excuser. In the present, it is conjugated as follows. Repeat after me. Je m'excuse. Tu t'excuses. Il s'excuse. Nous nous excusons. Vous vous excusez. Il s'excuse. Now, because s'excuser is a reflexive verb, it will use the auxiliary être, and it will be conjugated as follows in the passé composé. Please repeat after me. Je me suis excusé. Tu t'es excusé. Il s'est excusé. Nous nous sommes excusés. Vous vous êtes excusés. Ils se sont excusés. And finally, using the nous conjugation in the present, nous nous excusons, and removing the ending ons, we can conjugate the verb s'excuser in the imparfait as follows. Please repeat after me. Je m'excusais. Tu t'excusais. Il s'excusait. Nous nous excusions. Vous vous excusiez. Il s'excusait. One final point I need to make is that when you use the imperative to apologize, as in excuse me, we will use the verb excuser as a non-reflexive verb because you are not excusing yourself here. You are asking to be excused. So when saying excuse me in French, you will either say excuse-moi or excusez-moi if you use the vous form. Okay, we have one more point to see, and it's how to say that someone or something is on time, late, or early. There are 3 categories. The first one is for people. The second one for transportation, like planes or trains. And the last one is for things that tell time. So basically watches or clocks. And this one is a bit old now because in our digital time where phones and devices are automatically adjusted online, when is the last time you ever remember your watch being late? Anyway, First, for people, we use the verb to be, être, and en retard for late, and en avance for early. This means that I am late is je suis en retard. And you are early is tu es en avance. For on time, we always use être à l'heure for people and things. For example, elle est à l'heure means she is on time. And le train est à l'heure means the train is on time. But for transportation, we will usually say that things have lateness or earliness when they are late or early. This means we use the verb avoir and de l'avance for early and du retard for late. So the sentence the train is early would be le train a de l'avance. And the plane is late would be l'avion a du retard. Now, for clocks and watches, we can also use the verb retarder. But I would argue that it's not used that much anymore. This means that you could say my watch is late in French by saying ma montre retarde. However, nowadays, if you ever hear someone talking about their watch being late, they would probably use the same form as transportation and say ma montre a du retard. Okay, finally, in English, you use the word late and early for seasons and years. In French, it's quite easy for month as well, but it's different for seasons and years. If you'd like to say early June, you could say début juin. And late May, you could say fin mai. But to say late spring in French, we would say à la fin du printemps. And to say early summer, we would say au début de l'été. Same for years. Late 1995, we would say à la fin de l'année 1995. And for decades, like early 90s, we would say au début des années 90. There are more examples in the notes so you can see all the differences, but my point is that unless you're talking about month, you will need to spell it out and say at the beginning of the spring, for example. All right, that's it for today. I hope you were able to follow along and get every point I try to make, but of course you can always ask questions in the comment and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And maybe you can use the comments to show me what you learned. Try to come up with one sentence that is a mix and match of all of today's points. Maybe something like, I'm going to start to apologize in late summer. In the meantime, I hope you learned something and I'll see you on the next one. Au revoir.